So I'm also a scientist, and we are going to do an experiment here in the room. So the slides are going to be in French, and I am going to speak to you in English. Unfortunately, my French is not good enough. I had 3 years of French in the Netherlands, in gymnasium, but I don't dare, impart my Dutch accent onto you. So let's keep it at English, please. So, okay. This is Dr. Meyer's slide, which he made a long time ago, and it's still true. You know, the Republic of Innovation. We've been talking about this here before, yesterday also at our dinner, and now we have to stay on the edge in Switzerland, but also in Europe. We have to continue to innovate. We cannot rely on, even though they're fantastic companies like Nestlé, or in Germany Daimler, or we have to innovate as a country, as a continent, and that's we are looking into why is this again English? We'll see. Okay, biotech. We think it's the backbone of innovation in the pharma industry, and we've heard that from other speakers here before. And I'll just go into that. So, I fooled you. It's in the English presentation, but it's good enough. Yeah, I thought it would be the French language presentation, but we'll make it work. So, as we've already said before, we were founded in 2001 by, amongst others, Henry B. Meyer. At the moment, we have about 3 billion assets under management, euros, francs, dollars. It doesn't really matter anymore nowadays. And yeah, we are amongst the top 5 largest independent healthcare investors in Europe. So independent is very important. We are, do not belong to a bank or to another investment fund. We are really, as a company, independent. It's also important that if we are with 3 billion among the 5 largest investors, then it means that all the others are probably also about that size, and there are many smaller investors. So it just means that there is not enough capital in Europe to drive forward none of these companies. Even though we have 3 billion, I mean, competitors and peers in the US, they have much more. What we are actually is that we are regulated by the FINMA. We only do healthcare. So, if to counter Jesus a little bit, the only thing we do is healthcare. We do diagnostics, we do medtech, we do biotechnology, we do small pharma companies, small pharma opportunities. We only do that, and we've always only been doing that. So, and yeah, we have expertise also. You would be happy to know. I mean, most of the people that work for us are scientists, so biologists, biochemists, doctors, pharmacists, and so on and so forth. Those are the people who make the investment decisions in the end. That was the wrong slide, I guess. Maybe also important to mention is that we have significant investments from people from the board and also of the management team into the investment products that we have. So we have skin in the game, as that's being called. And we have a number of investment solutions or funds along the value chain of investment. Our largest product that people know is probably HPM Healthcare Investments. This is a combination of venture capital, private equity, and public equity. This is the largest product that we have. It is a bit chunky. It has large positions in certain companies in there because the companies just went public, and you have to hold these companies. They are locked up for a certain amount of time. It's basically immovable capital. And it can be quite volatile because the chunks are so big. They go up and down, the public parts of it, I mean. So, yeah, it can be quite volatile. It's more, we think it's more for, larger, wealthy investors or institutional-like investors. And what we also in starting new public funds, the HPM Biotechnology Fund, for example, that's more directed towards high net worth individuals, but also retail. It invests in more mature companies than what HUM Healthcare Investments invests in. Because, and it's also less volatile, although you are basically linked to what's happening in the biotech sector. And that hasn't been so good, to be honest, over the last 1.5 years. But that also creates opportunities. We also have investments in global healthcare. This is exactly what it says. Similar setup to biotechnology, but it's broader. It has pharma in there, it has insurance companies in there, all kinds of things. It's even less volatile than the biotechnology fund. And then we have two specialized funds that are really quite volatile. One of them investing only in China, the Chinese pharma market. The other one in India. It's called Cobra India. People that never believed that it was a coincidence that it was called Cobra when we took over the fund vehicle back then. But it was really a coincidence that we called it Cobra. So let's go on. Let's go on to, yeah, I'm just going to recapitulate a little bit what the others have been saying. Most of you will notice, or will notice by now, that the human DNA, amongst all of us, and is about 99.8, 99.9% similar. So this 0.1% difference makes up for all the differences between each other. And each cell in your body has DNA about 2 meters. That means, well, you can read it here. Sorry. You can read it here. It's a nice factoid, but that's not why we're invested in biotech, right? Human cells, your own cells only make 43% of your body. The rest is microorganisms, basically, that live on your skin, in your gut, everywhere. Your lungs, maybe. As we all know, there's about 30,000 diseases described, and only a part of them are treatable or even curable. And we will spend our last CHF for healthcare. Okay, that's, I didn't agree to this. I would say we would spend. So we would spend. So for those of you who are not specialists, I mean, this is basically the history of the last 25, 30 years in biotechnology. So since the mid-90s. Around 2000, the human genome was sequenced. This was for the first time. 2 projects basically published their results at the same time in Science and Nature at the same, basically, day. And people then thought that, oh, this is going to be fantastic. We're going to be able to cure diseases within a couple of years. And of course, that did not happen, because once you have the data, and it goes a little bit to what Philippe was saying before, just the data itself is not enough. You need to be able what to do with it. And that took a long time to figure out the mechanism and the function of all these genes and all these gene mistakes that were causing disease, and then figure out a way to correct them, or at least to alleviate them. That's a therapeutic development, and that's been going on since before the sequencing of the human genome was done, and also since until now, because this is the very, very easily, very simply shown here. It's a code of life. You go from the genes towards the mRNA towards the proteins. And most of the biotech drugs, treatments so far have been proteins, but of course, over the last 2 years, we learned a lot about how mRNA could be a treatment, or at least a prevention, because this is the technology on which the COVID vaccines was based. Yeah, and this is an important, the drug discovery in gene and cell therapy is really taking off very, very rapidly. You can see before the human genome was sequenced, there were just a couple of groups working on that, and that's now basically gone up more than 10 times. There were 2,000, gene therapy. Yep. Assets in development, CRISPR-Cas9. You must have heard about that. Basically the genomic scissors. So there's a lot of activity here. But the goal of these gene and cell therapies is basically to cure diseases, not just alleviate the symptoms, to cure the diseases, take away the origins. And that's what biotech is all about now. And also the cancer vaccines that Madia was working on is also based on the same similar aspects. So we have gene therapy, very, describe it very simply, not going into any detail. Gene therapy, you're basically replacing a missing or an incorrect gene with a new one. Gene editing, you are actually correcting the gene while it's still inside the cell. You can do that, you can take the cell out of your body or keep it in the body. Very complicated. This is not going forward as fast as many people would have wanted it to be. And cell therapy, taking cells out, changing them, growing them up with the different changed genetic structure, and expanding them and basically reinfusing them in your own body or into somebody else's body. I mean, it's all possible now. It's worked on now, but it's still pretty difficult. This is an example of gene silencing. In the case of the company Alnylam, here patients are producing a protein that is unfortunately mutated because the gene they carry is for some reason mutated. The protein is basically building up in their body and causing very negative effects, really life-threatening effects to some extent. And with gene silencing, in this case, you can basically direct a molecule into the cell, which basically destroys the incorrect gene product. So you get rid of it. So the level of this protein that is causing this disease, this hereditary disease, is declining, and usually patients get a lot better. And this is just an example. I'm not going into the details here about how this company came from being, a scientific discovery in the 90s, yes, through a Nobel Prize in this field in the 2000s to the first product on the market, 2018. What are we looking at if we invest in public companies? Well, we had about 400 companies in 2017, and we have now over 650 companies that we should look at and know and have an opinion on and invest in or not. So this is really quite crazy. It's almost impossible to do. You see this bump here in 2021. This is basically the year in which any company, any biotech or small pharma company that wanted to go public went public. And we'll see about how they fare in the current climate. This was also a reason why the biotech market basically took a dive down, because people were saying, what's going on here? This is not healthy anymore. So this is what we're looking at. If you look at the success of the biotech drugs, I would say they have been immensely successful. If you look here, and this is a slide we always show, it's a bit dated now because we're looking at the year 2000, but these are the biggest pharmaceutical products in the year 2000. There was only one biotech drug in there from Amgen, Procrit. And that was basically used to alleviate the symptoms of chemotherapy. Look at last year, the biggest product, you wouldn't be surprised, is BioNTech's Comirnaty. It's 37 billion. But of all the others biggest products, there are only three small molecules. The rest are biotech drugs, biotech-derived drugs, not marketed by biotech companies, with the exception of Moderna here, but by big pharmas like AbbVie and Merck and J&J and Bristol Myers and Lilly. So pharma has already bought into this whole biotech. It's part of pharma. That's why we're saying biotech is now the engine of growth for pharma. This is not unique to, this is the reality. What we are looking for is of course, innovation in high unmet need areas. Breakthrough therapies, orphan and niche are also important because pricing can be very attractive there, and this can then also be attractive to investors in these companies. We try to look for companies with validated clinical platforms, proven mechanism of action, but of course we also sometimes take a risk, otherwise you don't make money, also not in this sector. But what we always want to see is a good management team, because that's super important in biotech. There are no buffers if something goes wrong. And important at the moment is, M&A candidates. The M&A is picking up again after years and years of pharma companies saying, oh, the prices are much too high. Because biotech prices have come down, there's more M&A going on. This is the investment process. I won't bore you with this. There's nothing magic to it. It's just what we do is just what's in our head. What kind of experience we have, what kind of education, and so on. Then, if you look at the fund that we're running here, we have outperformed the NBI, which is the reference index for last for 22% since foundation in 2012, so almost 10 years. Last 2 years have been difficult, I have to admit, because the market was just crashing, and here you see what happened last 2 years. The index and the fund also suffered because of COVID, basically. There was a lot of COVID news every day, basically, sending stocks up and down and left and right, and it was super volatile. But I think now that COVID is hopefully largely over, I think we can go a bit back to the more normal state of things where innovation is being rewarded, and we can all make money again on a more consistent basis. So this is what we do. We looking at these mid caps, not so much at the small caps, because many of the companies that have gone public over the last 3-4 years are in big trouble because they went out at a too high valuation. The stock price has crashed. People are disappointed, but they need money again, and they have to be able to have something to show for. Otherwise, the refinancing will become difficult. Yeah, I think you can look at it later on. The only thing I would say, what we do in a portfolio, we try to get a decent size of European or at least non-US companies in the portfolio, because we think there is a lot of very good innovation ongoing in Europe. And the problem has been, as the other previous speakers have also alluded to, is to get that innovation out and also to commercialize this, to finally make money with it. And we've been able to pick some companies in the past. They're not mentioned here, but we were early investors in Genmab, the Danish biotech Pharma, and in Argenix, the Belgian biotech Pharma that now has a market cap of 25 billion. It's almost a small pharma company. I already mentioned that. This is Argenix. We've been started out here, and we've been slowly selling, which was a mistake, of course, because it kept on going up and up and up. But it's you have to manage your risk, right? You can't also have more than 10% of any stock in the portfolio. This was Avexis. This is one of these successes of gene therapy, bought by Novartis. This is Moderna, where we did go in quite early, but then, we sold too early, which is quite obvious. We couldn't believe this was happening, and that was a mistake, of course. So these are just a couple of examples. I think we also have examples where we didn't go so well. With CRISPR, we invested, and we quickly got out again. But now, at these price levels and with this development stage, we went back in again. With Editas, we never invested, and it's still down there. Bluebird, it was once the darling of the biotech scene. Huge valuation, and I mean, it's been a complete disaster, really. So we kicked it out at some point, taking a loss actually. But you have to be able to take your losses also. So just wrapping up here. My time is also up, but this is very convenient. 30 years ago, this was all the pharmacists and the doctors could do medically, medicinally, in a cell. They had small molecules. They did have some cytokines and recombinant proteins, such as interferons. They had some antibodies, monoclonal antibodies, to influence the cell, but most of it was small molecules. Nowadays, we have so much more tools to heal people, to make a difference. Gene therapy, gene editing, mentioning protein degraders is a new field, and monoclonal antibodies have been hugely successful. By far the largest drug class in the world today. But we also have RNAi therapeutics, alnylam, but cell and gene therapy is coming up big time. It will just take longer because it's never as easy as it seemed on paper. Okay, and yeah, with that, I think my time is up. And we are located in Zug. We also have a lake. It's a bit smaller, but so very nice. Thank you.